and welcome on to This Week in College Hockey, episode 19. It is playoff time here in NCAA Division I hockey. Dan Schulman here. Joining me today, Chris Pichet, back for the first time in quite a while. Chris, it's good to get back on the ice from the hardwood, isn't it?
Yes, it is. My stint doing pregame shows for BUTV has been quite exhausting, and I'm still tired as we had our last one today. So I'll be back for hopefully another good solid month of college hockey action. As I don't know, we'll see if BU can we'll get all of our takes on it. We'll see if BU can gain any momentum from that impressive victory over Notre Dame as we head into the last month.
And also joining us today is Jake Reiser, as always. Jake, I mean, you've been with us the whole season. What do you make of this whole postseason now? It seems like just yesterday we were starting the season back in October with a wild penalty-filled game against Prince Edward Island.
Are we sure this isn't the start of the regular season? Are we sure that we just haven't finished the preseason yet?
Well, if you ask Tom Brady, yeah.
This is where the real season starts. This has been incredible to go from October to now March and just see the way this team has evolved. And I mean, we'll get all our takes. You're right, Chris. We'll see whether BU can make it to Chicago or not. It's going to be one heck of a ride regardless.
Well, I mean, I guess if we didn't preface it enough right there, it is postseason time. But we'll get to all the playoff situations later. Also have two conferences still in regular season play, so we can break down the scenarios there for title clinching possibilities in the NCHC and Big Ten. But as always, we begin with our weekly honors, our teams of the week. Harvard and Denver. Harvard on a tear. They're 10-0 in their last 10 games. Not the hottest team in the country. That belongs to Canisius, but not as successful as Harvard has been over the past 10 games. But Denver also having a great weekend, sweeping a ranked St. Cloud State.
You know, I put Harvard on there because they needed to do everything possible. They needed to win out their weekend, and Union was looking like they were going to completely dominate. And a tie for Union on Saturday allowed Harvard to actually take the first seed, quote-unquote, in the ECAC from Union. So that's a huge win for them. Harvard is just rolling, and I think they're a force to be reckoned with.
And the interesting thing about the sweep of Denver over St. Cloud is St. Cloud is one of those, I'd say 4 or 5 teams that are truly on the bubble. If you go strictly by pairwise, the top 12 teams that are in the pairwise are pretty much locks to make the NCAA tournament, Providence being at 12. And now St. Cloud State finds themselves under 500, and they're still on the bubble. I mean, if you were to take the top 16 teams in the pairwise, you'd find St. Cloud State in that category, despite the fact that they're under 500. And you can't make the tournament as an at-large bid if you have a record of under 500. So that's something to note as we get into, who will be in and out of the playoff picture.
Another defensive player of the week for us this week, Chris Nell from Bowling Green. It's the first time really we've talked about him all year, especially after having the season he had last year where he was in the top 5 of many of the major categories in goaltending for college hockey. But Chris Nell, now with 3 straight shutouts entering the WCHA playoffs, Bowling Green a real contender now all of a sudden, and it all kind of goes to the way that they've been playing defensively, the way Chris Nell has performed down the stretch, and it really puts them in contention for a WCHA title.
Yeah, the WCHA, for lack of a better term, is really just a crapshoot. Anyone can come away and win that division, especially in the conference tournament. You've got no one inside of the top 30 from that division, or from that conference, I should say. So really up for grabs. And I think that Bowling Green is a team, it's all about, Dan, getting that hot goaltending as the season comes to a close, and Bowling Green is in line to really have a chance to kind of strike gold and get that NCAA tournament bid.
And Jake, I don't know about you, but a team like Bowling Green that did earn, as I believe, a home spot in the WCHA playoffs, which, incredibly important considering that is the only conference that has elimination in the playoffs. They'll be hosting Ferris State, the reigning champions, so really a chance for them to get on track. And Ferris State's goaltender this year, Justin Kappelmaster, was named the freshman goaltender of the week in WCHA. Chris Nell, the defensive and actual player of the week in WCHA. So, against Ferris State, do you feel like the matchup favors Chris Nell?
I think it does. I think that Bowling Green has evolved over the course of the season. I know that looking back at their schedule, Ferris State split both weekends with Bowling Green, including a Bowling Green 3-2 overtime victory not too long ago. So there's certainly a lot of exciting things to look forward to in terms of that matchup. It's going to be a great thing for Chris Snell to be able to maybe prove himself a little bit more and give Bowling Green some confidence going into the start of the WCHA playoffs.
Our offensive player of the week will go again to Denver. Liam Finley, a hat trick on Friday, an assist on Saturday, a 4-point weekend for him. A lot of really good offensive showings this weekend. I know Bowling Green's Kevin DeFore had an excellent weekend. Nolan Veazey from Maine had a good weekend. I think Liam Finley's hat trick, though, stands out.
No, absolutely. And you just look up and down this Denver roster. They've got almost everyone in double digits for points, from forwards, defensemen, all up and down the classes. I think they've done so well. And for Liam Finley, who came into the weekend with not a lot of points, he's got 14 now. He really stepped up his game and drew himself very high up in the statistics for Denver.
But the thing that we want to get to here that I think we've all been excited about since before we started recording this, the Silky Mitts of the week. We're only adding it this week because of a pair of highlight reel goals. The first coming from Tyson Jost for North Dakota, the freshman phenom, as you'll hear him being called in this video. Just absolutely undressing defenders, and, I guess we'll take it away.
The big save there would have been an assist for Dreger. They're off the skate of the official. Jost now, look at the moves! Tyson Jost! Top shelf! 5-4 North Dakota! The second of the night for the freshman phenom! UND back on top!
That goal was just absolutely filthy.
Yeah,
undressing not just one, but two Omaha defensemen and getting it past the goaltender. That was just an unbelievable goal.
Chris, I know you don't think that that's the best goal out of the two.
Well, what I was going to say first before we get to the second goal is not that I coined this term by any means, but freshman phenom has been my go-to since Eichel's here. I use freshman phenom just about every time he touches the puck. And then in the last couple weeks, I've started to use it a little bit more sparingly, but Keller deserves the tag, so I've been using it. But the second I heard that goal called, the freshman phenom stuck out. He's got to credit me at least a little bit there.
Yeah, it's
not that I coined
copyright
it,
infringement, right?
Yeah, WTVU wants some money our way.
Oh, my God. Nick Germain, another freshman phenom, not really a phenom, but another freshman.
A freshman with some good mitts.
That Chris thinks had the goal of the week. Jake, why don't we take it away as well?
The center, scooped up by Germain. Germain comes rushing in. Germain, great move, score! Oh, what a great stick handle by Germain.
Unreal goal. I think both really, but Chris, why don't you plead your case for it?
Well, I mean, they're just different goals. I mean, they're both terrific. I think the uniqueness of the stick handling from Germain is what stood out to me. He toe drags it, but in most guys, when you toe drag it, you bring it forward to bring it back. He did the exact opposite, and it completely fooled the defender, and he did it in such a quick manner that you have to watch it 3 or 4 times to really appreciate what he did. This weekend, I literally sat at my desk as I was prepping for the BU game, and I just kept watching that, and it was just like it kept growing on me. But that's not to take anything away from Yost. Yost's goal was good too, and Quinnipiac looking on the outside, they're probably not going to get it in the tournament, and whereas North Dakota is really going to need all they can get from Yost if they want to get into the big dance, because they've got a chance.
Yeah, and I mean, I think you can plead the same from Quinnipiac. They need to get more from players like Nick Germain, a lot more from depth players that, they haven't showed a lot this year. Players like Scott Davidson at forward, a defenseman like Derek Smith and Connor Clifton, forwards like Thomas Aldworth, Tommy Shutt, really haven't showed them a lot this year, and that's the reason why Quinnipiac finds themselves on the outside looking in. So if Quinnipiac gets some production like that from depth scorers, you could see the Bobcats race up the ECAC standings during this, or not the standings, race through the ECAC tournament during this month.
Just taking a look at where they slot, they're 5th in the ECAC, so I don't know what the playoff format is there, whether the top 4 also get a bye like it is in Hockey East. But if it is the same way, they host Brown, which should be an easy victor. Brown or Colgate or something like that.
They do host Brown this weekend.
That's an easy victory for them.
Yeah, I mean, Brown's offense has been abysmal. Their defense has been abysmal. They've been abysmal. Should be a win for Quinnipiac at home, and we'll get into all the ECAC, all the conference matchups, especially ECAC, just a little while. But that will conclude our weekly honors. I don't think Silky Mitts of the Week is something we could really say is a mainstay, because you don't get goals like that every week, and to have 2 in 1 week is really rewarding for college hockey.
It's only something that should come up when it's really deserving. And for Jost and Jermaine, ironically, both last names beginning with J, that was very deserving.
Guys, is it ironic at all that the first time we're getting the frosty mitts is when I'm on the podcast for the first time in a while? Is there any coincidence there?
I don't think so. I think it's the luck of the Pichet right there.
Okay, so when I'm back next, I'll make a prediction that when we record next, the first week after break, that we will have a Silky Mitts goal to add to the list.
All right, we'll see.
We'll
see if that prediction holds up. I'll have to hold you to that one. But now into our weekend roundup, and the real big thing I want to talk about here is the WCHA, the only conference that still currently eliminates teams in before the conference tournament begins. So Alaska Anchorage and Alabama Huntsville both had their seasons come to an end in the regular season. They will not be in the playoffs at any point this season, so they were done before the calendar even turned to March. Now, my question for you guys is: do you like that? Do you like the process of eliminating teams this early, or do you think that an all-inclusive conference tournament is something that is here to stay?
No, I think this works. If you're looking at the conference playoffs, you want as much intense competition as you can, and as much as the WCHA is only a 10-team conference, you just want to maintain a high level of excellence, and the cutoff 2 right at the beginning, I think, really helps.
Well, I think more than anything, what this means is that you just don't want to penalize the 3 and the 4 seeds. It's a huge advantage for the 1 and the 2 to get a bye. And I think, to me, what it really means is they want, teams 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 all to have the same chance to win, generally speaking. And I don't know, if you're Alabama Huntsville and Alaska Anchorage, I mean, I get that you can be upset, but both your teams, you were terrible. I mean, they both had really bad years, and I mean, I don't know. I just don't like, if you can't come in the top 8 in your conference, there's really not that much to complain about. I mean, you just had a bad year, and if it ends a week early, so be it.
That's why I give a lot of the luck to a goaltender that, Dan, you've liked a lot this season.
A lot recently.
Ati Tolvanen, who came up with a huge win in the last game at Michigan Tech, 5-3, that kept Northern Michigan just above the threshold to stay in the WCHA playoffs.
Yeah, I mean, the way Ati Tolvanen played over the last weekend, despite the loss on Friday night, it was only a 3-2 loss to Michigan Tech, who's one of the top teams in the conference, probably one of the favorites to win the conference. And then you beat that team on Saturday night, not only a big win, but a win on the road, which is where you're going to have to be in the next round. It shows that they have some real grit, this Northern Michigan team. And, it does come down to goaltending. You look at Alabama Huntsville's goaltending, it is just through and through terrible. I'm trying to pull up the goals against average, because I believe it's one of the worst in college hockey. It's the second, or it's real close to the bottom in college hockey. Carmine Guerrero is their goaltender. He's ranked 81st in all of college hockey with a 3.77 goals against average. And I believe their save percentage is even worse. Guerrero's save percentage the worst in college hockey among the 91 goaltenders who saw more than 20% of minutes this season. He had a .872 goals against average, or save percentage, rather.
That's nasty. I'm sorry for...
And it's nasty in a bad way.
A team like Alabama Huntsville, who started off the season really hot, unexpectedly, beating Ferris State. That's all they had, and then they didn't win the rest of October. And then they got 2 wins at Alaska Anchorage, and they didn't win the rest of November. And just up and down, it's really bad for Alabama Huntsville and that program.
Yeah, and a big thing about the WCHA, you have teams traveling from real long distances, like Anchorage, Alaska, which just had their ECHL team fold. A team from Huntsville, Alabama, which pretty much every other weekend you're seeing them travel up to the northern peninsula of Michigan or to rural Minnesota or even Alaska in some cases. So the travel really affecting teams. And another big question I have here is, could you see any of these WCHA teams folding in the next couple of years?
You could. I don't know exactly who. I'm sure that the money on it is really tough. Huntsville, Anchorage, and Fairbanks, both in Alaska. Just the travel there is really tough. And to keep it local in the Ohio, Minnesota, Michigan, the Midwest, I think serves the WCHA a lot better, as tough as it is for me to take 3 teams out of an already small WCHA.
Yeah, I think it's hard to predict. I mean, Jake's onto a good point there. It's hard to predict who's going to leave, but there, that money, I don't want to speculate, but you'd have to assume that money's probably a little bit fragile. And so maybe you could see a team dip out, but it's really hard to predict. I'd like to see, more teams get into college hockey, like the Penn States. I mean, we saw how successful they've been this year. They're ranked inside the top 10, and they didn't have a all but just a club team 5-6 years ago. So they've really made a big jump. And I think we might see a team kind of drop out, but I don't necessarily think that's at the forefront yet.
And I'll comment on both of those points, Chris. A team that we might see drop out is Alaska Anchorage because of the performance that they've put out on the ice, the poor recruiting of trying to draw kids up to Anchorage, Alaska, and also just the economic situation up there was the reason that the Alaska Aces cited for ceasing operations. And you could very well see the same for a team like Alaska Anchorage, which might rather fund a basketball program or a football program even than a hockey program, which, I mean, it's unfortunate, but you're going to see teams start to fall by the wayside. Now, Chris, adding teams, it's easier said than done, but you do have a lot of programs that are prospective in the fact that they would fit well in college hockey. One that really comes to mind for me is Maryland, a Big Ten team on the East Coast. You have a hockey hub in Washington right near you, where the Capitals right now are really catching on, and you have a team who's been good and found success at the club level, just like Penn State did, just like Arizona State did, that could make the jump to Division I within the next 5 to 10 years.
Another team that I'm thinking of is Ohio University. They do really well in the ACHA, and the only thing that's really stopping them from being a Division I NCAA team is the fact that the school doesn't actually fund them. If the school is willing to put some of their athletic budget towards the hockey team, they could actually become a legitimate NCAA Division I team, regardless of where they slotted in the NCHC. They could slot into the WCHA if they wanted to.
Great fit in the WCHA. Exactly what I was going to say.
Or what I think down in the long run, now this is not a short-term thing, you could see college hockey moving to 5 conferences if teams start to drop out a little bit. Maybe see the Big Ten, like a school like Maryland could join the Big Ten, Ohio could join the Big Ten, and then you would get the Big Ten closer to 10 teams, and then you might get a team or two from the WCHA join the Big Ten, like a Michigan Tech or a Minnesota State. And then, if some of the Alaskas were to drop out, or teams, an Alabama Huntsville or someone like that, you could throw a team kind of into the NCHC as well. So I don't necessarily know if 6 conferences is necessarily going to be how it's going to be in 15 years down the line, or 15 or 20. I
mean, to go back to the ACHA thing a little bit, you take a look at some teams recently who have joined college hockey. Penn State, Arizona State, both have come from Division I ACHA hockey. So it's not like there's not a precedent for something like that to happen. I don't know exactly who you'd want to join out of the ACHA. Again, Ohio is a really good fit. Rhode Island, maybe. I don't know whether that's too small. Illinois,
Rhode Island might
Delaware.
be a better fit for like a Division III.
Right.
Is what I'd think, because it's a little too small a market in Newport.
Actually, down in Kingston. That's
Kingston,
not even Newport.
Same basic metropolitan area.
But I
mean, call it that.
But I mean, looking at it, there are still teams out there that I think would fit very well from the ACHA.
Yeah, and the last team that dropped out of college hockey, if my memory serves me correctly, was Wayne State not too long ago in like 2007. So we're coming up on a decade now without Wayne State in college hockey. We've seen teams like Fairfield have a program that fell, Findlay University, Iona, the University of Pennsylvania had one, the University of St. Louis, the Billikens, yes, they had one as well. But often schools choose not to fund that program, choose to fund higher drawing sports like basketball, which we get in the United States. Basketball is becoming more popular than hockey. Football definitely way more popular than hockey. But I mean, you really can't doubt that expansion in college hockey is real. It's coming, and the Big Ten is, I think, probably the best thing that's happened to college hockey, is adding that conference and adding that association so that more of those teams can make a program.
You'd be shocked that more teams out, say, in like upstate New York, where there are already enough teams, in also very random places that a school like Syracuse doesn't really have.
Syracuse has a women's team. They would be perfect to have a men's team, and they had talked about that a couple years ago. Just really didn't pan out.
But there are teams out there, especially I think in the Northeast, that I think still could find a hockey market that just haven't decided to put the money into a program.
We will see how expansion in college hockey pans out over the next few years. Now, we move into a more pressing topic of the time. If the season were to end today, which it has, the regular season has, but the conference tournament's still well and truly on, but if the entire season were to end today, how would the NCAA tournament look? The USCHO released their weekly bracketology, and it's a bit surprising, actually, in my opinion, to see the way that they put some of the teams. You have the East Regional with Harvard, in order from 1 to 4, Harvard, Union, Providence, and Wisconsin. The Northeast Regional with Minnesota, Boston University, Cornell, and Bemidji State. The Midwest Regional with Minnesota, Duluth, Western Michigan, Notre Dame, and Ohio State. Very interesting one there. And the West Regional, Denver, UMass Lowell, which, in my opinion, the Riverhawks kind of get screwed there. Penn State, and Canisius. Guys, do we agree with this? I don't necessarily think I do.
There are definitely some matchups that I think are odd. I do like BU up at New Hampshire, Providence down in Providence. There are definitely some things that work there, but there are certainly some things that need to be changed, especially, Dan, like you just said, with UMass Lowell really getting shivved playing Denver, because Lowell is playing some incredible hockey, and they go up against one of the hottest teams in the country all year. You just feel really bad.
Yeah, and for Penn State, it might seem like an unfair draw, but it's even more unfair for UMass Lowell. It kind of reminds me of I think it was 2011 NCAA tournament when Boston College won the Hockey East tournament, but was shipped out because UNH was hosting the Manchester Regional, and UNH got the 4 seed there. BC had to be a 1 seed, so they were shipped out to, I believe, St. Louis, and ended up losing to Colorado College back when they were relevant, 8-2. I mean, it happens, but it's unfair to do it to conference champions.
That's why, no offense. Who hosts the Manchester? Is it still UNH or is it SNHU?
UNH hosts the Manchester, and Brown.
Yeah, that's why.
hosts
So
the Providence
that's the
Regional.
thing, that a Brown hosts the Providence, so Providence College can stay in Providence instead of Providence hosting and being forced to stay and really kind of putting another team in a bad situation who has to make the East Regional, who instead has to get shipped out to Cincinnati or St. Paul or St. Louis or just somewhere totally out of the blue.
Yeah, I'm surprised since Brown is hosting that Providence Regional. I'm surprised that they're in this version of the USCHO bracketology that Providence is in Providence with, Wisconsin and Harvard, and then Providence and Union. And if this is how the bracket were to play out, and it's not going to. I mean, it's really fun every week to kind of get into it and create your own bracket. But the truth is quite a bit's going to change between now and then. And I know that the pairwise isn't going to be impacted all that much, but you have to think a lot of the top teams are going to be playing up against other top teams. So when you beat those top teams, it helps your pairwise. So I still think that there's a chance that either BU or UMass Lowell, if one of those two teams runs the table, that they might have a chance at that last number 1.
And I put out another hypothetical here just because, we're on the topic of hosts going to host sites. Now, say Miami or North Dakota shocks the universe and wins the NCHC tournament to gain an automatic bid. Miami's going to Cincinnati because they host.
Right.
North Dakota's going to Fargo because they host. So now Denver and Minnesota Duluth, the 1 and 2 overall seeds that were set to go to both those sites, are getting screwed and have to go out east.
Well, I mean, the North Dakota thing could happen. I'm telling you, Miami, they're not winning.
Not a chance,
No.
but just
North Dakota
to put
could,
that out
though.
there.
I mean, North Dakota could.
The thing is, it's an attendance game for the NCAA. They want to
it's
draw
huge.
as big an audience as they can, which is why they're so hesitant to move Providence out of Providence in that situation with UNH to not keep them in New Hampshire. Why North Dakota, who basically makes the tournament almost every year, hosts in Fargo. You always want as many numbers as you can. You want to see that college hockey looks like, quote unquote, that it's thriving. I'm sure it is in some facet, but you always want to give the image that it really is.
And, I put out my own bracket projection earlier in the week on Twitter, and I had a few similar first-round matchups. I tried to keep the seeding the same, and I tried to put as the 15 and 16 my picks for Atlantic and WCHA. So the way I had it was the West region would be in Fargo, hosted by Denver. Denver playing Minnesota State in the first round, who I think is going to shock and win the WCHA. Union against Penn State as well out there. And then in the Cincinnati Regional Midwest, I have Minnesota Duluth playing Canisius, and then Western Michigan and Notre Dame, which that one agrees with the USCHO. In Manchester, I have Harvard as the number 1 seed there, hosting St. Cloud State, which I'm looking at it. I think they'll be out, and Ohio State will be in that spot. And then you have Boston University and Cornell as well in Manchester. And then in Providence, Minnesota taking on Providence as the 4 seed, and UMass Lowell taking on Wisconsin, who I think is going to win the Big Ten.
That seems honestly very fair, the way you have it drawn up. I think those matchups all work. It really doesn't screw over any team. I would love to see that type of a bracket end up happening.
I think that BU, if this is the bracket, I think BU would have quite a bit of success if they can get matched up. I mean, to me, let me see if I can find, where's BU on your thing here? Yeah, to me, I mean, Harvard, in this particular bracket, Harvard is a scary threat, but I know in the USCHO one, they've got Minnesota as the one in their bracket, alongside, Bemidji and Cornell.
And Cornell, yeah.
If that's BU's path, I really do, despite how streaky they've been, I think that they would not cruise through that bracket, but they would be definitely the favorites in my mind.
I think we see a similar game to the one they had against Yale back in 2015 if they were to take on Cornell in the first round, which for about 2 or 3 weeks now, that's been the matchup. Right. So if anything doesn't change, which is pretty likely, I mean, both Cornell and BU seem to be on their path to the conference semifinals at least, then we could see that matchup actually pan out, which would be terrific.
And as far as having Harvard in that regional, I mean, the W do versus the W don't. You've played Harvard before. Sure, you had that loss to them in the Bean Pot, but frankly, that feels like such an anomaly game for looking at the way the rest of the season panned out. You beat them earlier in the year. I think you have a chance to beat them in a hypothetical regional final.
You think that game's an anomaly? I don't think it is. I mean, Harvard's won 10 in a row.
I know they played 10 in a row, but BU could have kept up with them a lot better.
Harvard's going to win a lot more than 10 in a row if they keep on the roll.
I agree. I'm not saying that BU can't skate with them, but
right.
Harvard.
I'm not saying that's an anomaly for Harvard. I think that Harvard would have won that game regardless, but I thought that it was an anomaly for BU, that they could have played a lot closer throughout the whole game.
Even with no athletic scholarships, Harvard could win the national title this year. That's just how good that team is. And, I mean, we can talk about if we'll see mass exoduses toward the end of the season and as we wind down, so later on in the spring. But, you know, for a team like that, they're just dangerous. I would not want to be in that regional.
No, I wouldn't want any part of that.
I think you will see Providence drop down to a 4 seed because as the 5th ranked team in Hockey East, it looks as if they'll lose to Notre Dame in the conference quarterfinals because traveling to South Bend's a bit of a death sentence.
Well,
you only hope.
I think that's the deciding factor. If they beat Notre Dame, they're a 3, and if they lose, they're a 4.
But it doesn't really matter where you rank because Providence as a 4 seed has won it. Yale as a 4 seed has won it.
Yeah, it doesn't matter at all.
Right.
It really doesn't. It's kind of, it's about 2 things. It's about how you're playing coming into the tournament, and it's also, can you get a little bit fortunate with your matchups? I mean, some teams just match up better against other schools. Like I think BU, for example, if they were, to play against a team like Union, I think they match up really well against a team like Union because Union, BU struggles against the UMass Lowells and the Notre Dames and the Denvers, teams that are going to just be more physical than you and be mature and not make mistakes in their own end. And
have that one line that can control a game and have a solid 6 defensemen.
Mm-hmm.
And that screams Lowell, Notre Dame, Denver, and to some extent Duluth.
I would love to see college hockey come up with what PDOs each team has. I know that the NHL has finally started to do it. But frankly, when you have a matchup as great as, hypothetically, a Notre Dame versus Providence out in South Bend, sure, those teams are incredibly skilled, but it comes down to luck. And I would love to see the PDOs of both of those teams and see just where the pucks are bouncing, how they're bouncing for both of those teams at the current moment.
Yeah, and a lot of puck luck talk has been the key, I think. You hear it all the time, teams having poor puck luck on any given night, or, some teams getting the bounces. That's kind of what it comes down to in the NCAA tournament. You saw it with BU Providence. Providence got a really key bounce.
Yeah, but but that was,
that was just a misplay.
That was, that's not a good bounce. That's a poor goaltending.
That was
on-
probably a bad example.
on
But
O'Connor.
North Dakota against BU got a good bounce when the puck bounced off the boards the wrong way and ended up
Yeah,
kicking in
see,
front.
I'm always a believer, and Quinn has echoed this before. I'm always a believer that if you are the harder skating and better working team that night, generally speaking, the bounces aren't going to kill you. I just think over the course of a hockey game, so many different things happen. The puck is going to bounce in a million different directions, and I think it's just the oldest excuse in the book, like, oh, bad puck luck tonight. You hear coaches, especially at the NHL level, talk about it all the time. It's like, yeah, I mean, that's going to happen. You're also going to win games when you don't play your best and you win, and I get that it's more magnified in the playoffs, but if you are, generally speaking, it feels like the team that gets the good puck luck is the team that's skating harder.
And if you hang your hat on puck luck, then you're
then
obviously
forget about it.
Right.
You're already taking the loss.
Yeah, that's like in baseball going up to bat and looking for a walk.
Right.
Or the strike zone wasn't in our favor tonight. Well, you know what? Don't have that attitude.
No. But the NCAA tournament, it is approaching fast, and we'll be looking at projections throughout the rest of conference tournament time until we get there. So Selection Sunday is not too far off, guys.
Not at all. I think it's going to come down to the wire, and it's going to be a lot of fun.
It really will be. And now we'll move on into our BU portion of the show. Boston University actually off this weekend. They did earn a bye and a share of the Hockey East regular season title last weekend with a split against Notre Dame. Our own correspondent, Marissa Ingemi, was in studio a couple days ago with me to break down the weekend series with the Fighting Irish and the Terriers. It's weekly recap time here on This Week in College Hockey, and we bring in our correspondent, Marissa Ingemi, to break down the weekend series against Notre Dame. And Marissa, despite a loss on Friday night, I think both nights were very positive for Boston University.
Well, once again, it was a nice rebound the next night for BU, where this has kind of happened all year, where they've responded to some losses on Friday nights, winning on Saturday nights. That's happened a lot all year long. But even a Friday night game, they looked pretty good in that game, despite losing it with a few goals from Notre Dame. Anders Bjork, just unbelievable. So, and Cal Peterson had a good showing as well in net for the Irish. But I think overall there's more positives than negatives to take out of this weekend heading into the Hockey East playoffs after a bye week.
Yeah, and Anders Bjork and Jake Evans were on a totally different level on Friday night. Really put Notre Dame over the top, giving them the edge over BU in a tough game on Friday night for both teams, really. It was a gritty one, and I wouldn't say the better team won. I think both teams were pretty even, but credit given to Notre Dame defensively. Nardella and Gross had a great night. Cal Peterson is probably one of the most elite goaltenders in all of college hockey, and he stood on his head Friday.
I mean, I'm just trying to think. On Friday night, you have Bjork and you have Clayton Keller. Who's the best player on the ice out of those two?
I mean, it's tough to say. They play very different roles. Keller's definitely more of an offensive spark, while Anders Bjork is like a Jack Eichel type player who can take over a game. While Clayton Keller can't really take over a game, he does produce. He gets stuff done. I think they've become pretty similar players, but they play different roles.
Right, but you could argue those are the two best players on the ice in that game on Friday night, probably. So,
Yeah, well, I mean, and I'd even put Cal Peterson up there.
well, yeah, when you have a goalie playing that well, that's always going to make the difference in a game.
And
That's the X factor every time.
He makes 24 saves in the third period to keep it a 2-1 game, and then Notre Dame scoring the third to make it 3-1, and that was really all she wrote. That was when the crowd got taken out of it. The BU bench really was deflated. You could see they were on their feet for most of the third period after that goal. They were down on the bench, but definitely a big rebound on Saturday night. Still allowing the first goal, but it was a real scramble in front that led to a Notre Dame goal. But in the second period, Kiefer Bellows, who has started to look like the player he was expected to be over the last couple weeks.
Kind of like how he looked right after winter break, right after the World Juniors. It looked like he was turning that corner and then just kind of disappeared again. So it kind of looked like he's back at that point again.
Absolutely. And the thing with Bellows, he on the power play is starting to position himself better. Even on offense, even strength situations, he's positioning himself better. He's going in 100% for the puck. There's not that lack of compete that you saw from him earlier in the season. He's becoming a player that is strong and physical and is willing to sacrifice the body for the puck. And I think that playing on the third line, the checking line with Clunan and Phelps, has helped him immensely because now he's the skilled player on that line. You have Clunan, who's a playmaker, who has actually gotten 3 points since being on the line. And you have Chase Phelps, who has just found his game all of a sudden after a rough start to the season.
Yeah, Chase Phelps has certainly been a pleasant surprise for this BU team, something they kind of need. And something with Bellows playing on that third line as well, he's matching up against other teams at third lines. He's going to have a lot more space than he would if he was playing on a top line or even a second line where other teams would match up a lot better. So there's that, and he's also just been very receptive to the role he's been put in, which really took a while because he really wasn't obviously receptive to coaching earlier on this season. I think that's fair to say. So that's changed as the year's gone on, and it does happen. Players do mature as the year goes on, and Bellows has had runs like this where he's slowed down. So I think it'll be really interesting to see what he does in the postseason because we've seen him perform well at high levels on big stages before.
But the second goal was the game-winning goal on Saturday night. John McLeod, with assists from Clunan and Bellows, he got it done, a 55-footer from the point. And Chris Bichet and Jordan Thibault were on the call. Here's what it sounded like from Agganis Arena.
For Bellows, the goal scorer for BU over the line. Nifty backhand pass to leave it for Clunan. Clunan now up top. McLeod's blast, and it's a goal! John McLeod, top of the right point, absolute laser.
Wow. That's where Mama puts the peanut butter. Top shelf. Johnny McLeod, what a clap on that was, huh?
And that was John McLeod with, I guess you could say, a Johnny Rocket, if you want to take a term from when Johnny Boychuk was on the Bruins. But definitely a blast. A goal that's an NHL-level shot, and that's another player we've seen improve very much so this season. John McLeod had a rough 2015-16 campaign, but he's really turned it around this year, and he's become a stay-at-home defenseman and a mainstay in Quinn's top 6D.
He's had a real bounce-back year, and it's really been needed because we have Brandon Hickey injured. There's been a couple of other issues on the defense. It took Dante Fabro a little bit to get going, and he's had his rough games here and there at times, not holding the blue line always. And so having that guy there kind of affords them to have players like Fabro and McAvoy to really push the play offensively as well, because you have a guy like McLeod who stays back there. And it's nice to see him get on the board because he really has had a good year, and he's been pretty underappreciated with this team after he really struggled a lot last year. So it's really made a big difference on this young team to have a guy like that back there playing well.
And as good as Anders Bjork was on Friday night, Clayton Keller was just that good on Saturday. Scored a pair of third-period goals to give the Terriers their third and fourth of the evening. 4-1 win for BU. They earn a share of the Hockey East title. It was the goal that they set at the beginning of the year. And you got to credit Coach Quinn's guys. They really stuck through and persevered toward the end of the season with a tough schedule, tough couple of series after the Beanpot loss to Harvard. And down the stretch, they've looked like they're ready to compete in the playoffs.
They've responded well. So now they're going to match up with a team in the Hockey East quarterfinals. They have the first round off, so they'll have a quarterfinal series here at Agganis. We'll see who that team is. We won't know until the first round is over. So once again, BU plays very well at Agganis for the most part. They've been pretty successful against Hockey East opponents all year long, so you'd imagine more than likely they move on to the semifinals at the TD Garden like they did not do last year after losing to UMass Lowell after being able to defeat UMass Amherst in the series previous. But just back to Clayton Keller, what a year he's having. I mean, this is a guy who from start to finish has just been spectacular. He got hurt, and it's really a shame he missed those games. The numbers are ridiculous when he's been in there and when he gets a point. I don't know the exact numbers because it's changed a bit since I last saw it. But by the Beanpot Championship game, it was something like they only lost 3 games when he's got a point or something like that. So just his contribution to this team has been huge. And I've said it a few times, he's a guy, he's going to go to the NHL, and he's going to be good right away playing with the Arizona Coyotes. He's going to be one of these guys that makes that leap and going to be good right away. It's just, you see it out there. He commands the play. He has so much space for himself. He uses his speed well, and he competes. He competes harder than almost anyone on the ice any given night, and that's exactly what this BU team needs.
Yeah, and you said it. I mean, the Terriers played 34 games in the regular season. Keller had 38 points all season long. He had more points on the BU had games. He led the team in points by a margin of 4 over Patrick Harper, who also refound his scoring touch. I think the team's clicking at the right time. The line shuffling that Coach Quinn did prior to the weekend series against Notre Dame has really paid dividends, and you're looking at a team that is really starting to find its confidence, a young team that's clicking at the right time, and that will head into the playoffs hungrier than ever, I think, and more motivated than ever.
They responded really well to a really bad Beanpot loss. And it looked like in a Friday game against UNH a few days later, after just a horrid first period, it looked so much like the first period against Harvard where they just couldn't get shots off. It looked like this team was going to go into a funk, but ever since then, just even with the loss to Notre Dame this past Friday night, they've really just rebounded nicely. They have a break now to get some things together, and there's no reason to say this team can't go on a deep run if they're playing like this.
And you mentioned matchups. We'll see who they'll be matched up against in the quarterfinal round of the Hockey East tournament. The first round will feature the bottom teams from 5 to 12. Providence, the first team not to get a bye. They'll host UMass, who they played last weekend. It will be Vermont hosting Maine, Merrimack hosting UNH, and Northeastern Connecticut. They will reseed if any lower team wins, or any lower seed wins, but numerically BU is matched up against Merrimack, which despite being swept by the Warriors in the regular season, I think in the playoffs, the matchup favors BU.
I mean, it has to. Merrimack's been weird this year because they swept BU. They beat BC at one point this year as well. But on paper, that's a series BU should feel really comfortable with going into the quarterfinals if that's who they get.
Thank you very much, Marissa, for breaking down the weekend series, and hopefully we'll get more of your good insight when the playoffs turn to Agganis Arena.
Looking forward to it.
That was Marissa and Jemmy for our weekly recap. We touched on it there at the end of the weekly recap, but guys, I want to put the question to you. What do you think BU's best matchup in the Hockey East quarterfinals would be?
I think it's tough to say. I think that there are great teams all up and down the lineup that BU had a tough time with all year. Maybe Northeastern, maybe UVM. I would have a harder time against.
There's
they
no
can't
mathematical
play
way to play UVM.
It's basically UMass Amherst isn't going to beat Providence, so it's basically one of three teams: Northeastern, Merrimack, and UConn.
For me, though, I think, and as crazy as this sounds, best matchup is easily Northeastern. Now, they haven't been as hot as they've shown they can be in the second half of the season this year, although they have been pretty good. Their top three scorers are elite. Zach Aston-Reese, Adam Gaudette, Dylan Sakura, I think top 10 in the country in terms of players, all three of them. But who else do they have?
You can beat Ryan Ruck, too.
I was looking at it, and during the Beanpot consolation game, their last two lines, the bottom two lines, 3 and 4, had a combined 22 points on the season.
God.
I think the best matchup for BU would be UConn, and they're the 9 seed. So that the only way that happens is if both UNH and UConn were to win, assuming that both Vermont and Providence take care of Maine and Massachusetts respectively. So I think UNH would be the easiest matchup for BU. They got 3 or 4 points against them recently, and I do think they're going to beat whoever they play, but I'd say Connecticut is the easiest matchup. Then I'd probably say it's kind of a toss-up between Merrimack and Northeastern, but I don't think you want to see Northeastern just in the chance that Ruck gets hot. But I think if Ruck and Northeastern come into this building, BU's going to put 4 or 5 spot back-to-back nights against them. I really think that they're going to handle whoever they play.
Without looking, what's Ryan Ruck's save percentage this season?
It's below 9.
I would say 893.
892.
I mean,
and you can beat Ruck.
He's been horrible.
That's the real reason why Northeastern will never be successful, even with scores like ZAR, Gaudette, and Sakura, because they don't have goaltending.
Exactly.
Never have had goaltending.
And that's why I'd rather play.
Witt.
That's why I'd rather play Northeastern too, because the BU offense feels like it's starting to jive again. You can beat Ruck pretty easily, and Ottinger's playing well. The defense the last few games with the new lines with McCoy and Summerby together, and Chris with McLeod, I think it's working well. I think that you could beat Northeastern pretty well.
One quick note, and I just want to touch on this before we move on. So you mentioned, I'm glad you brought it up, Jake, the Summerby and McAvoy pairing. now that Hickey will be back, we assume, for the playoffs, I think they're going to put Hickey back with Fabro. They've been together pretty much all year. Now, what do you do with the other two pairings? Do you think they're going to go, as you mentioned, Chris and McLeod, or do you think they're going to go? Do you think they'll go Chris and McLeod and Summerby and McAvoy, or do you think they'll revert back to Summerby and McLeod?
No, I think you're going to keep Summerby with McAvoy. Dan, you had a talk with Coach Quinn, and that he had had a good talking with Charlie McAvoy about pinching up too much. And I think you need to keep a good stay-at-home defenseman like Doyle, someone who doesn't have a lot of speed, someone who's defensively responsible, to let McAvoy have the ability to do that, but also McAvoy has been pulling back, so I like the matchup with Summerby and McAvoy still together.
And Jake, I was really impressed with how well. I mean, it's tough to play with a guy that you've never played with before. I was really impressed with how McLeod and Chris skated together. They were really good using the wall behind Ottinger. They were good advancing the puck up. Chris picked his spots. I think he was probably a little bit more stay-at-home this past weekend just because you're playing a Notre Dame team. You can't afford to make mistakes in your own end. And also, he didn't have much experience playing with McLeod. But overall, I was really impressed with those two guys together, and I'd like for that to stick.
And I think the same thing, same mentality, same idea kind of went into putting Chris with McLeod. Very similar pairing to McAvoy and Summerby. You have a stay-at-home in McLeod, a big physical guy like McLeod, and then you have Chad Chris, who likes to pinch up a little bit in the play.
Chad Chris, a smaller defenseman, he's got a lot more confidence now that he knows he's paired with a D-man who can rely on the boomstick if he needs to, a guy who's going to be able to stay back if he needs to, and let Chris be able to skate up the center of the ice, break down the neutral zone, make plays, dump the puck into the zone. And I think it gave the whole defensive core a lot of confidence.
Real quick before we move on now, what is your prediction for the quarterfinal matchup with BU?
I'm gonna go with.
I know it's a tough one.
I'm gonna go with Northeastern just because we said it. I think it's the right move. UConn would be tough. It'd be tough for me to see them advance. Who are they playing? Merrimack.
UConn, Northeastern, UNH, Merrimack.
So I mean, if Northeastern advances automatically, UConn can't. Then yeah, I'm just gonna go with Northeastern.
Chris,
I think they'll play Merrimack, and I think they'll beat Merrimack.
For me, I think UNH is going to upset Merrimack because UNH really they're one of those teams that always has their number. So I think UNH upsets Merrimack.
I think it's a bad matchup for UNH. They play on the biggest ice surface in Hockey East, and they're going to be going to play at Merrimack, which is the smallest surface. I think Merrimack's going to provide some difficulties for UNH.
But for me, I think the best matchup is Northeastern because of defense. And, that's really what it boils down to come championship season is defense. And a team like BU, we just talked about, they clearly have one of the top defensive six in the nation. And I think Denver makes a good case for having a good defensive six. Chris, you mentioned it earlier, UMass Lowell as well. And those are the types of teams that gives BU problems. Only teams really that have better the top six defensemen in college hockey. Moving on now, though, to looking at the other conferences. Hockey East not the only one entering their conference tournament this weekend. 3 others also into their conference tournament. The WCHA, Atlantic Hockey, and the ECAC. And I don't really want to touch on the matchups too much and the standings or whatever. But, who do you see coming out of the WCHA and Atlantic? Because those two conferences, the only team making the NCAA tournament is the tournament champion.
Well, out of the Atlantic, I like Canisius and I like Air Force, 2 teams that have done very well all season. I'm going to go with Air Force just because of a little bit of the surprise factor. Their goaltender has been playing pretty well all season for them, Shane Starrett. And I know that we've talked about Canisius and their goaltender, Charles Williams. But, I mean, I like Starrett. I think that Air Force, overall, they even had more wins than Canisius did. And that's not a factor of games played. They both played 36, so I like Air Force's chances here.
I will go with Canisius and go a little bit outside the box. I will say that Minnesota State is going to run the table and win the WCHA.
For me, I agree. I think Canisius is the hottest team in the nation right now. They got hot at the right time, and they did get the number 1 seed in Atlantic Hockey thanks to Sacred Hearts heroics out in Colorado on Saturday night. But when you have a matchup like that between Canisius and Air Force, it's going to be out east. Travel's eventually going to affect a team like Air Force, and I just think Canisius is the better team right now. But as far as the WCHA goes, who do you see coming out of that?
Michigan Tech could. I know the Bemidji State leads, and it's interesting that I'm going with the number 2s and the number 1, but I mean, they're pretty good.
The WCHA is just a mess.
Right.
I mean, any team can come out of that. It's not as cut and dry as Atlantic has become down the stretch, where you have your clear-cut top 2, and you have a third team like Army that could bid for a tournament, the tournament crown. Robert Morris, I really don't think is going to threaten. But in the WCHA, your top 4 are just those are the teams that you need to watch out for, and those are the teams that are probably going to advance the semifinal weekend.
We've talked about all season. Again, it goes back to goaltending. Michael Bitzer from Bemidji State, one of Jordan's favorite guys, is 20-11-3 record, 168 goals against average, a 932 save percentage. But Angus Redmond from Michigan Tech isn't bad, 187 goals against average, 916 save percentage, 17-8-5. So clearly the goaltending's there for both of these teams. I know it was tough for Tech to lose Alex Patan, but you've seen a balance of scoring come from basically everyone in the lineup. They don't have any guy over 20 points, but let me do a count here quickly. 1, 2, 3, at least a dozen people with over 10 points, which makes a big difference for a team like Michigan Tech. Whereas for Bemidji State, you've got probably your top 2 lines who will be able to score really well, and then a lot of depth. And so I think that with a balanced lineup like Michigan Tech has, they could run the table for all we know.
Yeah, I have Minnesota State coming out of the WCHA.
For me, Minnesota State, because of the way that they've performed against the top teams this season. I know the playoffs is a lot different than the regular season, but it's still the same matchup, still the same 2 teams taking on each other at the end of the day. I don't see Bemidji State as much of a threat as they were at the start of the year, although they will be tough to take down come the tournament. But they did just lose last weekend in their final regular season game, and I know although they were playing for nothing, to lose your final regular season game and to do it against a top team like Minnesota State really starts to put confidence into that Minnesota State team and maybe a little hint of doubt into Bemidji State. So we'll see who does come out of the WCHA, which is a mess, as we mentioned. But my pick, Minnesota State. And the final conference, or the final 2 conferences, ECAC and Hockey East, which will group together. Definitely, you're going to see a couple of at-large bids, at least 2 from each conference coming into the NCAA tournament. But who's your pick quickly to win the ECAC and the Hockey East?
ECAC, or Jake, go ahead.
Give me Harvard from the ECAC, and frankly, give me Lowell from Hockey East.
I've gone back and forth on this. I've spent quite a bit of time thinking about the Hockey East. It is the conference that we here at WTBU cover the most. I'm going to say Harvard. I'd be surprised if a team other than Harvard, Union, or Cornell wins the ECAC. I'll pick Harvard, and I think BU is going to go on a run here. I don't know why, but I'm going to pick. I think they've got the easiest road. I think that BC is going to hang on against Vermont, and then BU is going to be able to play BC. I'm going to say BU is going to win the Hockey East tournament.
I think Lowell's going to win the Hockey East tournament over BU in the final. And I also have to disagree with you there, Chris. I think BC's going to get they're going to get swept by Vermont at home in the quarterfinal round. I just don't think BC has it, and I don't think 2 weeks off is going to solve any of their problems.
Yeah, I don't know. Part of me just thinks they're going to have a bad weekend, and they're just going to find a way to just, in 3 games, kind of creep past Vermont and be one-legged coming into the Garden.
Yeah, but regardless of who BU plays, they'd either be playing BC or Notre Dame.
Well, I think there's a huge difference there.
Yeah.
You're either playing Providence. Who would you rather play, BC, or would you rather play Providence or Notre Dame? You'd rather play BC.
The way that they've played
Yes.
lately. But, you're now playing Notre Dame if BC is to lose to Vermont, Notre Dame's to beat Providence, so it's a Notre Dame BU and then a Lowell Vermont. I see Lowell and BU making it to the final, and I see Lowell. I really don't see any way of taking them down, and they've made 5 straight, or they will have made 5 straight league championship games, so it's going to be tough to vote against them. And then the ECAC,
Lowell's the favorite for sure.
definitely.
Yes.
And then in the ECAC, it's hard to vote against Harvard. I'd love to see a Harvard Union or even Harvard Cornell, especially because Harvard and Cornell are such bitter rivals. Love to see either of those teams make it to the final. But the one dark horse I do have to say could be in the conversation is St. Lawrence. But we'll see how that goes.
Yeah, I mean, we'll see how it goes for sure.
I think Quinnipiac will upset St. Lawrence in that quarterfinals.
Ooh, that's
Gold talk
that's
right
a
there.
spicy upset.
That would be interesting to say the least. To see Quinnipiac maybe bidding for the ECAC tournament bid to the NCAAs, but we still have a couple weeks before that happens. So, Chris, we'll see if that prediction does come true, but I mean, it very much is possible. Are some of the games in the week we're watching now in the NCAA before we wrap it up? Still in the regular season is the Big Ten. They will go for 2 more weeks after this weekend. Wisconsin and Penn State. That is really the big series out there. Wisconsin really made a climb to the top. They're currently sitting, I believe, still tied, or now they're in second place behind Minnesota. They were tied for first with Minnesota entering last weekend, but Wisconsin making a bid to make the NCAA tournament as an at-large, possibly, the way that they've been climbing up the pairwise. And in the NCHC, Minnesota, Duluth, and Western Michigan, 2 teams in the top 5 of the pairwise rankings going at it with each other. And then the playoffs, I didn't really see too many interesting ones. There weren't too many that caught eyes, but in the Hockey East, UConn and Northeastern definitely going to be a series to watch. Merrimack and UNH one to watch, and I'd put Merrimack on upset alert for that series. But I don't know about you guys. Do you guys have any other thoughts? Agree with these?
Yeah, I agree with those. I think that there are. I'm definitely watching the Wisconsin-Penn State series. I love that matchup with Luke Cunnin and Trent Frederick going up against Dennis Smirnoff. You have Peyton Jones going up against a team that's really been able to split the difference with 2 goaltenders. That's a fabulous matchup, in my opinion.
Yeah, I'd agree with you, Dan, on the series out in the Big Ten with Wisconsin and Penn State. I don't think that there's really anything that outside of that series that's all that interesting. One note on Minnesota, they've got 2 pretty much cupcake series to finish the year. They're at home next weekend for 2 games against Michigan State, and this weekend they're on the road against Michigan. So they play the 2 worst teams in the Big Ten, and they've got 4 games. If they can win all 4 of those, that's going to put them not as a sure lock to be that last number 1 seed, but it's going to get them a lot closer. So, it's a tough conference, but Minnesota's got an easy stretch here over the last 2 weekends.
And I think, guys, that's going to do it for us here on This Week in College Hockey, episode 19. It was a great discussion, and we'll be back, not next week, because we'll all be on spring break. We'll take a bit of a hiatus, but we'll be back following quarterfinals weekend to break down conference tournament championship time. Should be an exciting time for us and for all of college hockey. So, for Chris Pichet, for Jake Reiser, for our correspondent Marissa and Jemmy, this is Dan Schulman. Thanks for listening.